been a hard week for my family. You see, my grandfather just passed away. 84 years old. Some would say that's a long life. But you know what? That's only a fraction of what awaits for him in eternity, because he died knowing my God. There's many different views I can think of to talk about my grandfather. For instance, I can talk about how my grandfather was a college superstar. He played for the University of Missouri. He played both football and baseball. He even got a plaque in the Hall of Fame at Missouri. His baseball was so good that he even became professional. He played for 2 years. I know you're thinking that's kind of a short time, but the 2 years is because a tragic accident happened during the off season when he was on a road construction. A piece of road came up at him in the eye, forcing him to retire early. I could talk about my grandfather being a father, being a dad to my dad. My grandfather taught my dad how to be a dad. My grandfather poured his life out into my dad. To the point where people saw my dad on the street and also knew my grandfather, they would say, "Wow, Rob, you look exactly like Jerry. You look exactly like your dad." He would say some type of corny joke, and then they would say, "Wow, you even sound like him too." You see, my grandfather poured his life out into his family. He taught my dad how to be a dad and how to be a man. And you know what my dad did with that information? He taught me how to be a man. And hopefully he will teach me how to be a dad. You know what? My grandfather's legacy was not a baseball card or a plaque somewhere. My grandfather's legacy was his deep, real, committed relationship with Jesus Christ. Anyone who knew my grandfather could tell you this, that he knew Jesus. He would proclaim the gospel with anyone and anywhere. In fact, when we would go to his house for holidays or to visit, Jesus would come up in some situation. My grandfather challenged me and my siblings with memory verses and passages. He challenged us with thoughts and ideas. My grandfather desired us to know the God he knew so well. I remember the first Bible verse that he challenged me to memorize. You know what? I didn't even want to memorize it. I was young, I was stupid. And my dad then challenged me with a candy bar to memorize it. And this verse is Psalms 119, verse 11. And it said, "For thy word have I hid in your heart, that I may not sin against you." You know what's funny? That verse describes my grandfather extraordinarily well. You see, my grandfather and his wife, my grandma Doris, would be in a room, and I would ask him a question, or I would come up with a situation in my life, or anything, and they'll be back and forth with passages and memory verses and context and an application of how I can use the verses. They were encyclopedias of the scripture. They hid that word in their hearts so they may not sin against God. That's my grandfather. My grandfather's legacy is right there. The early church, they believed in some things, which we have kind of gone away for in our culture. You see, in Acts 7, when Stephen was getting stoned, at the end of the text it says that Stephen fell asleep. Well, if you know anything about stoned, it's when they throw giant rocks at you to kill you. And Stephen passed away. He died from this execution. But the text records that he fell asleep. The early church had such a radical view of death. And something I think we need to focus back on, because their radical view of death is that, they're just asleep for now. Because their hope was bound up in the resurrected Jesus. Because, Jesus rose from the dead. And then he promises that he's going to come back and we will die no longer. There will be no more death, no more sorrow, and the dead will raise. You know what? That radical view should be taken today. His life might be ended here, but it'll be raised up in heaven. And we can have hope in that. Even though I won't be able to see my grandfather for years to come, until Christ comes back or until I go into my grave, I will see him again. And this life that we live will just be a fraction of what eternity awaits. You know, that's a hope we all need to have. That Christ is our hope. That the resurrection is our hope. Because without the resurrection, what is there? What hope could there possibly be? The resurrection of Jesus gives us the hope that we will see our loved ones again. It gives us the hope that the death is not the end. Because why? Christ defeated death when he raised from the dead. If you don't get anything from my grandfather's life, please get this. That he put all of his chips on Christ. He devoted his whole entire life to Christ. And when times got tough, because times did get tough, eventually he was not even able to get out of the house. Times got tough. He still proclaimed Jesus. Why? He was completely satisfied in Christ. What satisfied my grandfather? Oh no, it was not the Hall of Fame. It wasn't the baseball cards. It wasn't the people coming to his house for autographs. It wasn't that he was just a good father. It was that he was completely devoted to Christ. So I ask you today, are you completely satisfied in Christ? Are you completely bound up in Christ? If something happened to you today, or something happened in the world, will that make you give up on Christ? You look at my grandfather. He had a lot of things taken from him. Baseball career. He had loved ones taken from him. He had his athletic body taken from him. He had so many things taken from him, but yet he still hoped in Christ. Are you satisfied in Christ? That's just my penny.